Upon learning from a vet that it had a mere 2 hours left, a dog's cries resonated, foreshadowing the astonishing twist ahead. In disbelief, Stella locked her gaze onto the vet who had just shared profoundly grim news. Clinging tightly to her dog Buddy, she sought solace in their closeness. The vet's explanation left no room for hope. Buddy teetered on the brink of death with only 2 hours remaining. As Stella wept, Buddy's eyes welled up in tandem, a poignant display of shared emotion. Despite his own agony and fear, Buddy's paramount concern lay with his human, as evidenced by his soothing licks, offering comfort in distress. The contrast was stark. A mere few days ago, Buddy had exuded vitality. Stella grappled with the harsh reality that circumstances had taken a heart-rending turn. It all started when Stella got her own place after finishing school. For the first time ever, she was living on her own. The plan was to take her childhood dog with her when she was able, but he ended up dying when she was in her final year of University City. She lived on her own for a few months, but eventually she decided to adopt a puppy. She went to the local shelter and checked out the dogs, but when she saw Buddy, they both fell in love straight away. It was incredible how quickly the bond between them blossomed. She saw Buddy lying on a hard concrete floor, still only a pup but already so sad, and she had to pet him. As soon as he got some attention, his whole face lit up. He was wagging his tail and licking her fingers when she tried to scratch him through the bars. That same day, he went home with her. They had a lot of fun, and Buddy became Stella's world. The dog was happy, but there were moments when he made Stella worry. One day, when he was still a puppy, the dog suddenly became sick. He had a seizure, and Stella had to get him to the vet as quickly as possible. It turned out he hadn't eaten, and he had played too much. His blood sugar dropped, and he got very sick, but as soon as the issue was figured out, he was back on his feet. It did give Stella a big fright and showed her how much he had become her baby. For a few years, everything went well. Buddy would get some eye or ear infections, but generally, he was pretty healthy. Stella worked from home, so she was with him pretty much all the time. They had an amazing bond. One day, Stella noticed that Buddy wasn't eating as much as he usually did, and he was sleeping more than usual. Since he always played outside and often caught lizards and frogs, she thought that he had probably eaten something he shouldn't have. He wasn't sick, he was just off. So, she watched him all day and he didn't seem to get worse. Then things took a terrible turn during the night. He started to vomit and shiver. He was really cold. She always had electrolytes in the house in case of emergencies, and she fed him that all night. But what started to freak her out was in the early morning hours when he wouldn't come inside the house. He went outside into a corner and refused to budge when Stella called. A sick dog that is trying to seclude himself is not a good sign. She was very worried Buddy was seriously weak. He couldn't even lift his head. Stella was really scared even his tongue was becoming pale. As soon as the local vet opened up, she picked Buddy up and loaded him into her car. Then she drove him to the vet as quickly as she could. Every bump in the road made him whimper in pain. It was horrible, but she needed to get her baby some help. When the vet was done examining him, Stella hugged him close on the exam table. That was when they let her and Buddy know that he only had a few hours left to live. Both the dog and his human started crying. The vet offered to put him down, but Stella wasn't willing to give up that easily. She wanted to fight for the dog. They didn't know what was wrong with Buddy, and they didn't have all the necessary equipment and machines to run all the tests they would need to find out. They suggested taking him to a vet in the bigger city. If his condition improved, he might have a shot, but his body was already shutting down. They didn't think he had any time. They did everything to make him comfortable and even put him on medication to treat all the symptoms he was experiencing, but without a clear diagnosis, they couldn't treat the illness. They were shocked by what happened next. They allowed Stella to stay with Buddy, but the dog surprised them. He was fighting hard to stay alive. He lay with his head on Stella's lap, and he slept with all the medicine. He was breathing a bit easier. He wasn't out of the woods by any means, but his strong fighting spirit was giving him a chance. They decided that Stella could take him to the city to an animal clinic there. It was around an hour's drive, but they didn't have a dog ambulance. It was all up to Stella to get her dog the help he desperately needed. They secured his IV bag to her car and made sure that Buddy was comfortable. She desperately hoped nothing would happen on the drive over to the city. She didn't have time to pick anyone up to help her. She was on her own, just Stella and her dog. The drive to the city was excruciating. Stella looked behind her a few times, but she wasn't even sure if the dog was breathing anymore. With tears in her eyes, she drove as fast as she could safely. What could make her dog get this sick this quickly? Did she miss something? She just hoped that she would get a second chance. The local vet had phoned the animal clinic, and they were ready to take Buddy in when they arrived. They checked him, and for a while, Stella was extremely frightened. But then they saw that he was still alive and just asleep. Here, they could do all sorts of tests to find out what was wrong with Buddy. They did x-rays to find out if he had any obstructions or if there was any sort of mass in his body. The x-rays showed nothing. His infection counters were very high, but they couldn't figure out why he had such a terrible infection. They did every test that they could, but all they could find was a bacteria that isn't even supposed to make adult dogs sick. Even in small puppies, it would only give them a runny tummy. It didn't make sense at all. They started to treat that, and slowly he got better, but they knew that if they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the dog without the medicine, he would be back to dying. What happened next is shocking. They had done every test they could think of, and Stella was terrified of taking the dog home without really knowing what happened to him. What if he wasn't able to fight long enough to get help next time? Then he wouldn't make it, and she would never know why. The vet had seen the woman's devotion to her dog, and she was racking her brain while she tried to help him. She had all but given up when one more idea came to her. It was one more test that they could run. It was a long shot. Very few animals actually suffer from the illness that she wanted to test, and even fewer are ever diagnosed. Even her nurse expressed skepticism, suggesting it might be futile, but it stood as the sole recourse left. They opted to assess the dog's cortisol levels, administering an injection before and after to discern any change, a final investigative effort. 5 days had elapsed since Buddy's hospitalization, and Stella's resolve to bring him home surged. Though test outcomes were pending, Buddy's progress was evident. Yet, just as they geared up to depart, the results arrived, unveiling a startling truth. Buddy's cortisol production had ceased. This ailment paved the way for recurrent infections and abrupt, life-threatening crises. Buddy had endured such a crisis, but his tenacity and an unwavering pet parent proved pivotal. The path to recovery materialized, a few daily tablets to normalize his cortisol levels, promising a wholly regular life. It was a heartening conclusion, a happy ending for all involved.